Councillor Mansell. Councillor Mansell, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just to let you know that there's been a bit of confusion, but you're down as an observer today and not as a committee member, but hopefully it'll be resolved before the next meeting.
So I won't be able to comment on anything.
If you want to put your hand up and comment, I can call you in, but you can't vote on anything today.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, members. Welcome to the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, 8th of July. I will move on to the first agenda item, which is apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've had an apology from Councillor Arnold Woolley and Councillor David Richardson. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It looks a big agenda. It's also a Buckley Jubilee, and I have family commitments from 1:15, so I should be leaving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, agenda item 2, declarations of interest, including any whipping declarations, to receive any?
Whether it's appropriate, Chair, but I'm a member of the Schools Parking Task and Finish group, which is agenda item 9. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, agenda item 3, minutes of the previous minute, the meeting held on the 10th of June 2025. Let's confirm as a correct record. I shall go through them page at a time, which is page 7, 8. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, page 8, Chair, section 4. I did make a suggestion that Cabinet feeds back to the committee their comments on any recommendations we made. I was under the impression that that would happen, but it's not recorded under any resolution. Could you clarify, please?
Sorry, if I could just come in on that. I have sent an email to the Democratic Services Manager with regard to that, suggesting it would be something that we could do across the board. So I am waiting to hear from him. So as soon as we've got a response on that, we'll let you know what's going on. Yeah, okay.
Anything else on page 8? Page 9? And 10. So just show of hands with regard to comment. Got those correct? Okay, those in favour, yeah. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, forward work programme and action tracking. I shall hand over to Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. There are quite a few changes to the forward work programme which you have in front of you, and I have just emailed around an electronic copy of the changes so that you can have a look at it afterwards or as we go along. So the next meeting is on the 9th of September. So the items that will be coming to the committee on the 9th of September currently are preventing suicide in public places and the repair and reuse project. The additional licensing for houses of multiple occupancy, that will be moving to October. The severe weather events, that will be coming to the October meeting, as will the winter maintenance, and also the report on the update on the 3 weekly bin review of 3 weekly bin collections. So that will now be in October, be the update. That's because obviously there is a recess, and to get that information back to you because the meeting is early in September, so it will be October now for that meeting. So Councillor Pearce is indicating, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That sounds reasonable to defer it due to the recess. But can I draw your attention to the bottom of page 17, the top of page 18? I think we need to clarify that it's not about the 3 weekly bin collections. It was about the missed collections across the board. That's all collections. That's residual waste, garden waste, glass, bottle, paper, plastics. So it was about the missed collections since the 28th of April, rather than the introduction of the 3 weekly bin collection. So I think we just need to clarify the title. Thank you.
Sorry, on the forward work programme that I've just circulated, it is the report to include missed collections, AHB collections and medical waste collections. So yeah, I think it is the
It's on the revised version.
the revised version on the email that I've just sent through. Sorry, yeah.
It's only been sent in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. There are a lot of changes, but I have sent you a copy that you can look at. Okay, thank you. Brilliant, thanks. So shall I carry on?
1 second, Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
So,
Thank you, Chair. Under the action tracking on page,
if I can just carry on then. So that's September. Then October, we will have the additional licensing for houses in multiple occupancy, the severe weather, winter maintenance, the corporate risk register, duty of care, waste management, the update on 3 weekly waste collections and recycling performance Q1, and then the waste compliance and duty of care across the council, and the HAMP to include cleansing policy, pothole repairs and mud on roads. Then in November, we're hoping to have the regional car parking body with us, the draining policy, street cleansing, mud on roads, that'll be in November, and also the Flintshire Bus franchise network sign off. In December, we'll be having pest control, land ownership and food waste contract. And then in January, the strategy for public conveniences. Katie did look at moving that forward at the request of Councillor Parker's, but we have since sent out some information, so that will still be coming in January. The review of the 3 weekly bin collections is on for the 13th of January, and grass cutting, ground maintenance and weed control to receive an update. So if I move on to the action tracking, the first two are sort of longer term. The request for external funding, that should be with you shortly. The others, those 6 has been completed. The terms of reference, that's still outstanding, but that should be with you shortly. The 3 weekly bin collections, that's October now. Those last 2 have been completed. The biodiversity online member workshop, just a reminder for everyone, we've had a really good response to that. The 17th of July, 4 till 6 is the online session for that one. And then the Communities for Work Plus, that's been added to the forward work programme for the 9th of June 2026. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
thank you, Chair. Further to the action tracking on page 18, which is a request that I made for the public conveniences, that strategy to be brought forward. I would dispute that I was sent information, because the email I was sent essentially said, I will consider this, and it didn't say anything beyond that. That was sent by the chief officer, not by, Margaret. So I dispute that this is completed, because I don't think it is, because I was essentially sent a holding email. Secondly, what I would request is, if the portfolio is not going to review the strategy before January, then can I request that there were no changes to public access to the lavatories until that has come to us, because the funding has been removed. The budget line for public lavatories has been removed. So presumably at any point they could be closed. And I think this committee needs to see what the plan is before it's implemented, because we don't know whether they're going to introduce charging, whether they're going to close it, whether it's going to be handed over to the town and community councils. So I would just ask that there were no changes made to public access to the lavatories until this committee has seen what the strategy is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we don't have, Councillor Banks, do you want to?
But thank you, Chair. It has been to informal cabinet to start discussions. It's going now with some options to town and community councils. Provisionally, the date for where they would be closing is September at the moment, but it will be discussed at cabinet at the next cabinet meeting, and then we can come back to you after that.
Yeah, by all means, come back.
So just to clarify, informal cabinet has discussed it and you're looking at potentially closing them in September. I specifically asked for a review before that, and now you're telling me that cabinet has discussed it essentially in camera without members knowing about it, and there's a proposal to close them.
I'm being totally open here with you, Councillor Coggins-Cogan, and we've discussed it, but it wasn't an agenda item. It was informal, leading up to going through the process, which obviously will involve yourselves, because no decision will be made without committee, will it?
Okay, thank you. I think the conversation needs to be had further outside of the meeting, and we can look at that. Any other questions on the forward work programme or action tracking? No. Okay, we'll move to the recommendation on page 11. 3 recommendations there. The committee consider the draft forward work programme, facilitating consultation with the chair of the committee be authorised to vary the forward work programme, and that the committee notes the progress. Can I have a mover for those recommendations? Moved and seconded. Okay, have a show of hands, those in favour. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is the Connect to Work. I'll just bring in the Chief Officer, but just to say, I believe that this is Andrew Farrow's last meeting with our Scrutiny before he retires from the council. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done for us and wish you well.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, that's correct. The last Scrutiny. I begin to think how many I've done since 2009. But anyway, so this is the latest programme off the block from UK government to try and improve economic inactivity in our workforce. It's driven by Department of Work for Pensions. This is the first site of it, so it sets out the proposed governance structure, etc. And Niall is here to talk you through the detail of the programme, but also the risks for us as a council moving forwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Good morning, members. So yes, Connect to Work is a UK government programme. It's a new programme, and DWP are the managing authority for it. UK government are keen that the programme is delivered by local government, not by DWP itself, as part of their new way of working. It's a 5-year programme, as you'll see in the report, and we are well through the first year already in terms of that timescale. It is a voluntary programme, so participants are not mandated to come on it. They have the choice whether to do so or not, and it is designed that it fits into the local ecosystem of existing support for people who are unemployed. Overall, the programme aims to help 100,000 people a year to find sustainable work, and that translates down to 1,300 people a year in the North Wales context. Proposal is that it will be regionally managed and coordinated through an accountable body who will themselves contract with DWP, sorry, Department of Work and Pensions, and they will then in turn contract to each of the 6 North Wales authorities. As you'll see in the report, Denbighshire County Council has offered to take that role on. Their first task, our first collective task, is to develop a delivery plan for the programme, setting out how it will be established. We'll see in 1.08, I apologise, it's the second 1.08, there's a numbering error in the report. The numbers that are estimated per per county, and you'll see in a Flintshire context that translates to about 900 people over the course of the programme. It should be stressed that this is a client group with whom DWP do not have any current contact, because it's not a group that are currently signing on as such. They haven't yet provided the underlying data for these assumptions, so please take these numbers as extremely sketchy at this stage, and they'll need a lot more refinement before we can have any great confidence in them. Fundamentally, again, it's a voluntary programme, so it's, you know, this is about encouragement of people to join the programme. There's no mandate on them to do so. The delivery of the programme can be directly done by the county council itself. It can be commissioned to outside bodies, or it can be a combination of both. Equally, that delivery doesn't have to be at the county footprint. It could also be delivered regionally on behalf of any number of the 6 authorities. The aspiration is that the programme will start delivery in January 2026. In terms of what the programme delivers, it is a supported employment programme. Now, that's very different from the programmes you've heard previously, particularly Communities for Work Plus that you've heard very recently. That's an employability programme. That programme works with people, helps to engage them, helps to identify the barriers that are preventing them get work, and then works quite extensively with them to overcome those barriers through a partnership approach with other organisations. And in due course, hopefully they enter the world of work, or certainly employment, learning, or volunteering. The support employment model is very different. The aim is they enter the workplace as early in the programme as possible, certainly within a short timescale. That's not a placement. That is a competitive job that they've secured. But then the support is provided to enable them to remain in the workplace, to help them to adapt to the job, and to help and support the employer to provide the right element of adaptation to that person's needs. So it is therefore very, very much beholden on the providers to try and find employers who are willing to offer that supported employment environment, even though it's a normal job. As the report highlights, there are 2 models: individual placement support, IPS, and then supported employment quality framework, SEQF, and both are very, very tightly defined. There's extensive standards to each of those models, and then they are based on an evidence-based approach, from across the UK and beyond. The latter one, SEQF, is the more intensive one, where actually the staff may well enter the workplace alongside the individual and help them to undertake their work, so they understand it and get it broken down on a task-by-task basis. So it's very, very intensive. The programme is funded on the basis of £3,700 per head. What we don't have yet is how that's modelled, and actually, what precisely we are required to do for that £3,700 per head. As Andy mentions, there are a number of risks that are highlighted in the report. The first is our capacity as a council to mobilise this. We don't have any staff sitting waiting to start the development work on this programme. So as the report highlights, we have got work to do to actually identify who's going to take the programme forwards and do the development work that's needed on it. Second risk is this may well require commissioning, and it's not necessarily an area. It's quite a specialist area. It's not necessarily an area where we'll find providers waiting to go. So there is a risk there we try to commission and fail to do so. Thirdly, as a voluntary programme, there's a risk we do not get participants to come through the door, and that will impact on how we deliver the programme. And then fourthly, because we would be putting quite extensive demands on any employer participating in the programme, there's a risk we do not get the job entries that we're expected to get. And then finally, and this will have come up at our discussion on Communities for Work Plus programme, it is a relatively short-term programme. Its maximum duration is only 5 years. And it does mean that if we employ staff to deliver the programme, that comes with a redundancy cost at the end. It's not identified as an eligible cost, so therefore there's a burden to the council should that happen. Again, as Andy mentioned, it's a programme in its earliest stages of development. All the 6 authorities across North Wales are all working away, trying to work out how this will be delivered and how it will fit into their existing provision. So the report, as you'll see, does not ask for authority to start delivering the programme. It asks only that we do the development work, and that we bring back a further report which fully identifies the costs and fully identifies the benefits and the risks of the programme, so you can make you can discuss it in a much more informed way. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Niall, for that report. Councillor Biffle, and then Councillor Coggins-Cowan.
For me, Chair.
Councillor,
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Biffle, very gracious of you. I'd like to move the recommendations and with a fourth recommendation, because we had the budget briefing yesterday, so I think all the councillors are slightly cowed after seeing the figures ahead of us. So on page 22, paragraph 2.01, it does concern me when you sort of say that perhaps this programme might go beyond the scope of the £3,700, so that the council would be essentially taking on another cost pressure which we can't afford. So I would add another recommendation that a programme be designed that sits within the budget envelope, and sort of that is the guiding principle right from the get-go. And also something that the officer just said about the redundancy costs. Can you just explain that further? Because if you're saying it's not a placement, this is a competitive job that someone's found, and then we just sort of provide support around that individual, why would the council then be liable for any redundancy costs? Thank you, Chair.
If I may, Chair, yes. So the redundancy costs of the staff that we would employ to deliver the programme is solely that.
okay, thank you. Councillor Biffle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Neil, for the report. I also for the report. Under 108, it states there each local authority has received participant numbers which the DWP estimate can be reached. I'm just wondering how those figures are arrived at. And I noticed, for example, that we have the same figure as Wrexham, 938. Sorry, well, it'll be 938 in total. And I'm just wondering really, why we are the same as Wrexham, because we do have a larger population and I guess a larger number who would perhaps qualify or be suitable for this kind of course. And under 114, can I ask whether we have any indication of the success rate of the scheme in the past? For example, the number of people who've gone on to full-time work, and perhaps even more importantly, how many of those are still in full-time occupation a year later or 2 years later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Biffle. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the numbers, I cannot provide the breakdown at this stage of how DWP arrived at those. We have asked for that and we do await that still to really understand what level of confidence we have in those numbers. Obviously, the programme is funded on a per head basis, therefore the numbers are really important to us. And we want to be confident that whatever we set up, we can deliver. If we scale it around 938 people, then we want to be confident we can hit 938 people and vice versa. So we are waiting for that information from DWP. It is tricky for them because they say this is a client group with whom they have no contact currently. So it's, I suspect, very hard for them to estimate. I suspect the reason our numbers look the same as Wrexham's is they're basing on a crude set of metrics, including population, and I suspect also things like inactivity rate, how many people are without work, basically. So that probably balances out. We have a bigger population, but they have more people out of work. So, but as you can see, the numbers look so similar. I think that's a fairly crude metric lying behind that. In terms of success from other areas, I can't provide that. There are very, very few examples and certainly only one other example in the North Wales context. So this is not an area we have any experience in at all. There is one relatively small programme operating across North Wales solely for people with learning difficulties. But they are only a few months into delivery. So it's a little hard to extrapolate from that to what this programme will be able to deliver in terms of success. There are other UK examples, and we hope once we've got a bit of capacity to do the development work on the programme, we can learn from those wider UK examples. But at this stage, we haven't yet had the opportunity to do that. So now, in terms of the success previously, that's not learning we've got at this moment in time, unfortunately.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Right, thank you, Chair. And Best wishes for your retirement, Andrew. We've worked a lot together over the years. Right, thank you. Recommendation 2 has the words "where resources allow." If the resources don't allow, what is the implication on this programme? In 103, it does say about the 5-year programme. And as we've seen with initiatives like this, there is usually some funding that then tails off. So is this fully funded for 5 years at no risk to the council? Reading later on, I don't think that it is, but could you clarify that? 107, 108, each area will have an accountable body. So this is a new level of bureaucracy that's coming in, and I assume it's fully administered. So there'll be associated costs with that. As Councillor Coggins-Cogan said yesterday, we did come into the council to listen to the budget projections 25-26, and there's no doubt that the council is stretched, but we keep adding costs and costs. But you know, we can't support projects if there's no funding. You know, no one will come to your house and do work and not get paid. You know, so you know, let's look at this in reality. And in 115, I'm absolutely amazed how it costs £3,700 per applicant. Is that because it's not the true cost, but we're recovering every expense that's being paid divided by the number of potential applicants? Because, you know, it seems a lot of money just to get someone into work. That's how I see it in a simplistic way. And finally, under the resource implications, I'm surprised that this hasn't yet been done. Further modelling work is needed for the programme to understand whether the full costs of the operation can be recouped by the council. Well, surely we should do that first. Let's see if the costs can be recouped by the council, because it's mentioned there that you're already thinking there might be an overspend. So I think, you know, we should really look at this in the complete detail to see that, you know, what are the costs? Is it affordable? And I would support the additional recommendation that this will have to be done from the existing budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Yes, in terms of the funding, you know, I can't give the assurance on this. That's why the report is worded the way it is. This is to I suppose discuss the programme, raise awareness that it's here, it's being developed, but that we don't yet have the information that will allow me to give you a report that says yes, we recommend that we deliver the programme. You know, we have to recognise that until we've done that work on modelling the programme's costs and incomes, yeah, there is an underlying risk there that needs to be worked through. It is a brand new programme. It's still evolving very, very rapidly. We're still getting information from DWP, as I mentioned earlier. So in terms of that financial modelling, we don't have that data right now. But we're trying to keep in step across North Wales with the other authorities who are all going to their cabinets and scrutinies at the same time. So hence, you know, we're bringing it out at a reasonably early stage in its development. The cost per head includes absolutely everything. So that if we employ a staff team to support individuals, to engage businesses, to enter the workplace and work alongside that individual, could be for several months, actually helping them to do their job in physical terms, that's everything in there. That's all the administration, that's overhead, everything. And in fairness, you know, compared to the normal day-to-day programmes we get from Welsh Government, that's an extremely low number, very, very low number indeed. Hence flagging up the level of risk. You know, had that been a number considerably higher, we might have had a lot more confidence at this stage. What we don't know yet is what the implications are should we fail to deliver the numbers that are expected. You know, it's funded on a per head basis. I'm told it's an overall grant, so it's not literally per head. If we don't get the numbers, you don't get paid. I don't think it's quite as harsh as that. But there are quality standards in the programme. There are targets in the programme for job entries. There are targets in the programme for job retention. And what we don't understand at this stage are what are the implications of failing to hit those targets, because that also adds risk to the programme. These are all things we need to understand before we can go any further. You also asked a question about what happens if we don't find the resource to do the development work on the programme, and fundamentally the programme does not get developed if we do not find that resource. So that is a significant risk and challenge in the very, very short term. How can we spare enough officer capacity to actually do the development work? Bearing in mind it's an area of work for which we have no existing knowledge and capacity. This isn't something that's a commonplace activity. It's not an employability programme. It's something very different, and therefore that brings its own challenges. Happily, however, hopefully we can work alongside our North Wales colleagues and share learning with each other and share capacity. You also mentioned the accountable body. It's a similar model to has happened with the Shared Prosperity Fund programme, which I'm discussing later with you. What it means is it combines 6 sets of administration into one place. It's a much more cost-effective way of delivering the programme. So what otherwise might be 6 contracts with DWP, 6 programme managers dealing with DWP, 6 sets of admin dealing with DWP, it's done once, and then there's something light touch between us and that accountable body. So it's worked really well with Shared Prosperity Fund. Hopefully it works just as well with this programme as well. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, Niall. Can I just come back on 201 about, you said that we haven't actually done this, the further modelling work, to understand whether the full costs can be recouped. Once you've done the modelling work and those costs cannot be recouped, what's the situation there? Are you advising the committee we should accept the risk of an overspend?
We will bring that back to committee and to cabinet, and it will be their choice. There's a weighing up exercise between the benefits of the programme to this client group versus the costs. That will be an open question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up. So the programme is completely voluntary. We don't have to participate in it. It is, thank you, that the officers answered with a nod of the head. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any further questions from members? Online in the room? No. Okay, we'll move to the recommendations on page 19. With the inclusion of number 4 as put forward by Councillor Coggins-Cogan, seconded by Councillor Pearce, to ensure the programme fits in the budget envelope is what I've written. Is that good words? Okay, so that's the recommendations. Can I have a mover for those? Moved, seconded, and can I have a show of hands those in favour? Okay, that's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 6, the council plan 23-28 end of year performance report 24-25. I'll hand over to the chief officer.
Thanks, Chair. And if you detect me being more vague than normal during this item, by an unhappy coincidence, as soon as the chair declared that I was retiring, I've lost all internet access. So I'm not quite sure whether I've got a hard copy of the covering report. Thanks. So this is one of 2 reports on the council plan. This is the retrospective one, item 6. Item 13 is the forward-looking report about the future state and presentation of the council plan. So this is Q4. I always have to remind myself the format of council plan. It's a hierarchy of actions, measures and risks. And this report follows the traditional format where we focus on exception reporting. So where we've got RAG status when it comes to the actions, and of the 140 actions, there's only one red one for this scrutiny committee. You'll see that at 105, and that's about circular economy and recycling, which this committee has spoken long about in the past and no doubt will in the future when I'm not here. And then moving forwards, so that's your actions, and there's an explanation there about why that's not been met at 105. Then we drop down into measures, and there are more measures that have missed, and they're at 109. So you can pick out the sub-priority and then the action and then the rationale there as well. They're mixed across both portfolios, three for each actually. Three and two actually. The planning and economy ones are Flintshire Forest and also the net zero carbon. And you've had recently updates from Alex in terms of the progress we're making against that overall objective. It's probably just worth noting now, before we get to 13 later, we just flagged up about in paragraph 109 about the way that we report. We've always concentrated on exception reporting for the purpose that it does sort of concentrate the mind, but really we're also asking for your views in terms of how best to present council plan in the future. So that's it from me, Chair. Got any questions?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Healy?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Farrow, for your report here, and thank you to officers for the work that you've done on the council plan. My understanding is, and I think you did use the term exceptional reporting here, is that this report encompasses the ambers and the reds, the points in the council plan where we've not met our objectives, and tries to explain those, but there are still a significant number of green areas which we can, I think, say, well done. However, amongst these ambers and greens, there is something that seems to be conspicuous by its absence. The original council plan had a sub-priority of rural regeneration, and a definition of that to ensure that economy interventions consider and meet the needs of rural businesses and individuals. Now, there were 3 actions that were identified. CPE 052T, which was to recruit a digital connectivity officer to support rural communities. A report went to Cabinet on the 21st of January saying that that post had been frozen because of lack of finance. So we can, I think, understand the lack of progress as far as that one is concerned, and it was reported on. There were a further 2 that don't seem to be mentioned. CPE 053T, commission a data review for rural Flintshire and hold community consultation to better understand rural community needs, with a target date for the 31st of March. Now, that simply has not happened, although my understanding is that a lot of groundwork was done for it with Wrexham University in cooperation, and there was something that was ready to be brought to us to be discussed, but it never has done, and yet that doesn't appear as one of our amber or red items in this report on the council plan. Similarly, the 3rd one was to ensure that economic interventions consider and meet the needs of rural businesses and individuals, with again a target date of the 31st of March. That's a more difficult one to pin down and to identify and all the rest of it. It may or may not have been met, I don't know. But I'm wondering, because I think these are important. We are a council of 67 members, 37 of whom represent wards that are either rural or semi-rural, and 30 represent town centres. The town centres receive considerable funding, not enough, I'll admit. Niall will agree with me, and I acknowledge that. But it is really difficult to get funding support for rural communities. But I think there's a need for these issues to be discussed so that maybe they can work together, develop a plan. If they're within the national park, apply to the national park for funding or other alternative streams of funding. But I'd just like to know
why they've fallen off the radar, why they're not reported on here, and also why they don't appear to be in the next council plan either. But perhaps I'll raise that then.
Okay, thank you for that, councillor Healy. Any response from any officers? No?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, just to provide a quick update, it is covered on page 72, but just in summary, the Digital Connectivity Project Officer post was on hold due to the moratorium on new recruitment. However, happily, it has been released and we have filled the post. So an officer started about 3-4 weeks ago. Their role is multifaceted, but one of its elements is to support residents and businesses in rural areas to improve connectivity, I hasten to add urban areas too, to enable them to identify of the solutions that are currently available, what would best meet their needs. They also have a key role to encourage and facilitate investment in connectivity. So they will particularly be working with not necessarily not the mobile phone operators themselves, but companies who work with those operators to try and facilitate and encourage investment in mobile coverage across the county as well. So a critical role to play there. So yeah, happily on the first element, we do have a positive update, albeit it is later than we'd originally said. They weren't in place by the 31st of March. Similarly, the second element, the piece of work looking at the needs of rural communities, wasn't completed by the 31st of March. It is still underway now. It is a partnership piece of work, a research piece of work with Wrexham University. They've completed some initial stakeholder conversations to really understand how have rural communities fared over recent years. What do their broad needs look like? Where are those needs not getting met? And that is leading into now quite focus groups with small numbers of the most vulnerable members of our communities, targeting a small number of communities across rural Flintshire. And it's those in-depth conversations that will really inform our collective practice going forwards. And I don't, when I point at myself, I don't mean the economic development team, I mean the council as a whole, because of course rural issues are cross-cutting. They affect all parts of the council, not just economic development. And then in terms of the third element, that is a green, that is a positive. We've particularly found with, for example, the Share Prosperity Fund that we've managed to do a lot of work with the rural areas. The programmes that we've supported through Share Prosperity Fund have supported rural businesses, they have supported community groups in rural areas. A lot of work with the tourism sector, which inherently is quite rural in Flintshire. And then specific projects to develop Greenfield Valley and also the Flintshire Coast Park. And by definition, both of those are broadly highly rural. So a lot of success under that third one we can point to. So yeah, hopefully that update is useful.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Rose.
Thanks. It's just to look at the sub-priority for the Flintshire Forests. We were to put forward, not get accepted, just put forward 6 sites, and we only put forward 1. Were other sites on the running for it, and we just never put them forward, or was it just the one altogether? Obviously, Natural Resources Wales is obviously making the decision within the next few weeks. What was the cut-off for proposing these sites? And is this now no longer a viable option to achieve those 6 sites? Because obviously with a national forest would come additional grants and funding available for those sites and communities around them, which feels like we've now missed out on that opportunity if it's no longer possible to do that. Thanks.
I can do that. Okay. Yes, thanks for the question. I can double check with Tom Woodall, who's leading on this, but my understanding is that we still do have time to submit sites into it. And I know Tom has got a long list of other sites that he wants to submit, and that's part of an ongoing conversation with NRW. So my brief answer is that we haven't lost the opportunity to submit.
Okay, Councillor Rose, you happy with that? Yep. Okay, so Councillor, I've got others. I'll come back to you. Councillor Fears.
All right, thank you, Chair. I'm going to go straight to 105, recycling targets. It's been well scrutinised in this committee and also by the council. Members and members of the public have actively supported the change to the 3-weekly residual waste collection on the proviso that the service changes deliver the required 70% target. We've had the figures and we were told if we do this, we will achieve our target. And again, it's in this report that should we carry out all the service improvements listed, the council should be well on its way to achieving the 70% target. That seems to be a level of assurance that we will need to scrutinise going forward to ensure that any infraction charges which are looming do not take place. So further scrutiny of this will take place in due course, I'm sure. On page 29, at the very top, on the active and sustainable travel options, the last line says, we have not received the political support to finalise this. Can you just clarify what that actually means? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anthony or Lee, who's best to respond to that one?
Okay, thank you. I think that relates to obviously the measure that we're saying that we can declassify what we deem as hazardous routes. I think in terms of the item in question there's a wider discussion that needs to take place with regards to declassifying it, whether that affects school transport potentially or a multitude of other things. But I think that's something that we'd have to answer separately, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was with regard to the last line about political support. Are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, I think just generally on that point, when if we do declassify any given route, obviously that does have wider effects. It could be on school transport, it could be on a number of things, and obviously we would require that political support for any given proposal in line with discussions with the schools and residents. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce?
Yeah, thank you. When I look at something, say it hasn't received political support, normally it's been put forward for support, but it hasn't been supported politically. But it sounds as though that it hasn't yet come forward. So I think it'd be slightly unfair to say that it hasn't received the political support. Would that be a fair comment?
I think it's fair to say that discussions have taken place, but they haven't actually been resolved yet. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's not going to happen, but I don't think we've got the full approval either. So it's discussions that have yet to be finalised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going back now. So on page 27, paragraph 1.05, the last sentence says that the council should be well on its way to achieving the 70% target. Is there a time frame attached to that? When can we expect to achieve that 70% target? Just I think if we're saying we're well on our way, that needs to be contextualized. Alongside councillor Pearce, the political support also caught my eye. I can sort of detect that the officer is perhaps slightly cautious in his answers. So I just want to know, like, essentially, the political support from whom? Is it from ward members? Is it from the public? Is it from the cabinet? Is it from council at large? Because that's the bit I'm confused about. I couldn't quite detect what the officer was, the sort of meat of the answer. Also I haven't noted down the page, I'm afraid, sorry. Oh no, is it still page 29. And the Net Zero Carbon Council. Again, the last sentence under sub-priority Net Zero and Carbon Council is the carbon reduction figure included within the council plan measures will not include emissions from the supply chain. Is that a way of us fudging our figures to meet the carbon reduction figures, and thereby ignoring the real carbon emissions which we are causing, which are chiefly in the supply chain. We've been given a new methodology, which I accept in the short term makes our carbon emissions increase, but I accept it's because it's a new methodology, it's more accurate, it's not just based on spend, but to discount them in future, I don't think is the correct way forward, because I think we need to be mindful of our impact on what we do here. Because I mean, a consequence of that is that we could go with a supplier who is cheaper for the council, but creates far more emissions. There'd be no consequence to us, you know, in the reports coming to us. So I think that should be challenged. On page 30, I am interested in what the Chief Officer said about the reports, which currently are an exception-based report, which I think is good for officer time. It's good for the resources of the committee. I think all of us have commented this morning about how big our reports are getting. I think having a report presented to us which has everything in it is going to soak up officer time, and it's going to soak up the committee's time. I'm very grateful to the officers creating exception-based reports, because it is a thankless task. I am always mindful to thank the officers and to acknowledge, as Councillor Healy has done, that the majority are green on the RAG status. We are simply here to look at the reds and the ambers, because we are here to support the officers and to say to the sort of political leadership of the council, this is where the resources need to go. So I, for one, support exception-based reporting, and I think going to a sort of full report would be the wrong focus for the committee. And also it does align with the advice we had, guidance, admonishment from Audit Wales, which said we spend not enough time focusing on the problems. And I think moving away from an exceptions-based report would run counter to the criticism from Audit Wales. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Want me to come back on the last 2 points? So in terms of reporting, I'll feed that back in terms of what the scrutiny, if that's supported by all of the scrutiny committee, in terms of what the format should be, the focus on exception-based reporting. That, I don't know whether that needs to be brought into a recommendation from this report, but I'll leave that one there if it's supported more widely. In terms of the procurement and decarb, what we're trying to do is embed carbon reduction through all of our procurement processes. This is talking about how we report it. I think we've lost now that link between the Climate Change Committee, but there is a drive to try and ensure that it becomes part of all scrutiny committees and all large-scale procurement activities, that carbon reduction is up front there. And I think that's the role moving forward of all the scrutiny committees when there is capital spend and large procurement exercises, that scrutinies are aware of what is being asked of each of those portfolios. I think, to be fair to scrutinies, there will need to be some training in terms of how that is going to be reported and how that will be rolled out. But I think that was part of the process moving forward once Climate Change Committee was dropped.
Thank you. Just one second. On the obviously that point about not receive political support to finalise this, I think that's badly worded in the report, and if it was local support from local members unhappy with situation, otherwise it does prompt those questions. So that could be fed back, because I just it does raise eyebrows and raise questions.
No, I think I was just going to clarify the point before, so apologies if I was a bit woolly on that. I think to answer the question directly from Councillor Coggins-Cogan, I don't think it's a lack of support in principle, because it's in the council plan, it's agreed in principle. I think it was more to do with the the local discussions that are currently ongoing. in relation to that measure, you know, and these may involve, or will in all cases involve members, schools, pupils, families, etc. So it'll obviously local members represent those communities, don't they? So it's all those groups as a whole. And I think whether, you know, I think from a technical perspective, we can say a route is declassified. We might have a difference in local opinion with regard to that. They may believe that it's not. So I think it's just resolving those issues. Thank you.
Okay, that's sort of how I read it, because obviously knowing of an example of that situation where it's local opposition to it, but okay, thank you. I've got other speakers, so I can come back to you.
Just to move the recommendations, please.
Okay, I have noted that one. I'm going to come back to them. Councillor Wakeland.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question, but it's been answered. But just to go on to the National Forest part, my community was gifted a piece of land probably 4 years ago by Transport for Wales, which the whole community worked on very hard. And it was accepted into the National Forest nearly 5 months ago. So we've technically got 2. That's the top of Pennaford off Watts Road. There's a nature area and reserve. We're just waiting on some extra work to be done, and it does open up the land to lots of grants and assistance and funding, and so it's not just a county thing. Any sort of community can get involved. And as I said, we've been in there. I think it was middle of March we were accepted into the National Forest. So give it a go.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Chris Bithell.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm interested in the question that was put by Councillor Dan Rose and been commented on by Councillor Wakeham. And I think a number of us put forward suggestions for tree planting contribution to the national park, and I'm very pleased that Weper have got this, obviously, but I'm just wondering what happens to the other particular areas which we put forward as schemes for tree planting. You know, we've got this policy, the correct policy, I think, in terms of trying to increase the tree canopy in Flintshire by 3.8%. And, you know, the drive towards that has got to be supported all round and not just in one particular location. So I hope that the report we're going to get back from Tom Woodall will actually give us some more information regarding those other sites. Just on page 28, if I may, Chair, regarding active and sustainable travel options and safe routes to school. I think we need to sort of take note. You know, we've done this in the past as a county in order to spend to save and actually improve the access to schools by carrying out improvements to the route. But of course, even though we've done that at certain locations, there is a resistance, to say the least, from parents and indeed local members on occasions too, to actually allowing the children to use those routes. So I think, you know, perhaps we need to have something of a rethink on that, because again, in terms of value for money, you know, is it worthwhile pursuing at the end of the day in those circumstances? And again, on the next point there, really, in terms of the circular economy, it mentions there that the dry recycling rate is steadily growing, but it mentions there, for example, the composting rate has dropped by 9%. I'm just wondering what are the reasons for that in the view of officers? Is it because of the, you know, the cost of living crisis and people not actually contributing or paying for or requiring the brown bin collection? Is there any particular information regarding that particular drop? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, do we have any? Okay, Councillor Healy.
So I just want to seek clarification, sir, on the National Forest. Is our measure just concerned with council-owned sites? It is, because I know there's reference to other sites, and I'm aware of Park in the Past in Hope, and I think our Halkin Woods may be named as part of the National Forest or not. So it's just, our measure is just council-owned sites, is it?
Flintshire County Council owned land.
Anthony.
Thank you. Just to go back to Councillor Bithell, because he's exactly right in what you're saying, Councillor Bithell, in terms of, you know, we do a lot of schemes, safe routes community, active travel schemes, but it's all about changing the culture, isn't it? And you can put no matter what, out there for people to use, but you can't make them use it. But it's very much that chicken and the egg scenario that people will say, well, we can't travel any other means because there is no infrastructure. So the infrastructure has to be there, but it's that wider issue that of culture to actually get people to utilize it. So I think from my perspective, I think it's always worth it. Of course it is. Whether we can get people to use it, I don't think it's going to happen overnight. It's part of much wider transport plans. It's probably going to link into the report that Lee's going to be talking about shortly with regards to the task and finish group set up for, parking and, in and around schools. But yeah, it's certainly something that will have to happen over time, but the infrastructure has to be there to start with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on the composting?
Composting, any?
I believe that relates to the recycling centres, and it just simply, it's the time of year where the grass and leaves stop growing and there's less comes into the sites. I mean, it's also mentioned there about the site in Oakenholt having a 96% rate of recycling, which needs highlighting as well as an excellent figure. But it's basically just that. Certain times of year, as you know yourself, that's why the brown bin collection doesn't go the whole year round, isn't it? So it literally relates to that section of the drop. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just go back? Has there been any decline in the take-up of the brown bin collection? I don't know that's a question I'm springing on you, but you may have the answer.
Yeah, a little bit. It's predicting a shortfall, I think, of the year of equates to £60,000 on which is equivalent and about 2,000 bins, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from any members online in the room? Councillor Coggins-Cogan?
Thank you, Chair. It was, I asked in my original comments about the 70% target, if there was that could be contextualised. It says we're well on our way. When are we likely to achieve it? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so I was going to mention that. So I think we're just going to have to come back on that one, just due to representation today, but we'll get you an answer on that. Thank you.
Councillor?
Yeah, just a word to add to Anthony's. We hope, well, it was coming to September, but there's not enough time to get the report ready for then. So in October, we'll have the full figures, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the infraction charges will be having a good case to get rid of the 2 infraction charges that are still lying in wait for us. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Pearce?
Yes, thank you. I just picked up on Cabinet Member for Scrutiny. He said that the council has a shortfall of £60,000 on the collection of the brown bins. At £34, that equates to 1,764, and that is a massive drop in the number of people taking this up. Have you analysed why that may be? Is it the cost of the service in the current financial climate? Have you analysed why you've collected £60,000 less this year? Thank you.
It's a projected figure, and because there's still people who are purchasing them, but the actual service itself, it's remarkably good value for money. It's just that people, to be brutally honest, I think council tax goes up. Some people see it as we're not paying anything extra, and it's. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. No further speakers. I'll move to the recommendations, although we've had a request from Councillor Coggins-Cogan that we add a 4th recommendation that the committee accept in future as is exception-based reports. We have a seconder for that? Seconded.
Is a paragraph within.
Right. Although, as Margaret pointed out, it is already covered in 102, which, so if you're happy to leave the recommendations as is, with it being covered in 102.
The I mean, that's discussing this report. I think it's to say that in future we support the continued writing of exception-based reports.
Okay, well, we've had a move in the second to add a line there for fourth recommendation to set to be happy to accept exception-based reports. So we'll go over a show of hands of those in favour. That's fully carried. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 7, which is the feasibility of leasing car parking spaces and electric vehicle charging, and that is Anthony.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, morning, everybody. I'll go through this as concisely as I can. So this report has been requested by members of the formal Climate Change Committee, and that's to consider the leasing car parking spaces for electric vehicle charging. And therefore, the purpose of this report is to outline the practicalities of this option with the relative benefits, disadvantages and risks. But firstly, I think it's fair to say, it is an informative report. It is self-explanatory, but I think it'd be worthwhile if I ran through some of the background first, just to set its context. So, as we're probably aware, Welsh Government published its electric vehicle charging strategy for Wales in March of 21, and this outlined its vision of a network of electric vehicles charging, basically that enables consumers to make that switch confidently from your traditional vehicles to electric cars and vans. Now, although Wales currently has one of the lowest levels of EV ownership in the UK, the Welsh Government strategy aims to increase that public confidence through the availability of charging infrastructure, which ultimately aims to increase overall ownership. So I think we can all see that EV adoption is increasing, and having charging stations in and around our Flintshire car parks will, of course, go towards that and encourage more drivers to make that switch. And much has been done in recent years to enable development of that infrastructure. We've currently got 15 charge points across the county in various car parks, as you're probably aware, and we've got a further 7 that are programmed to be going in shortly. So in terms of Council's current policy on EV charge points and how we've progressed our charging infrastructure to date, well, as detailed within previous reports and within the appendices to the report, we've successfully employed our current strategy of acting as the enabler rather than the direct provider. And that's been employed so far. Now, the reason why we've taken this approach is quite simple, really, because it's a very fast-moving market with the EV infrastructure. And no sooner is new technology developed and invested in, and then it's been superseded by something else. And hence the purchase of that infrastructure can actually pose quite a big risk to providers and the council as a whole. So to give you, a practical example of that, we could tomorrow say, right, these are the latest charging points, we're going to install them just down the road. We put a business case forward to say we'll get 5 years to sort of pay back that investment. Year 2 or year 1, they could have been superseded, and we don't get anybody visiting our car parks, and therefore we've invested a lot of money that we can't recuperate. So by the council identifying the sites for private investment, this allows us to actually develop our EV infrastructure without the risk of direct ownership and maintenance. Now, although this model allows for the council to take a proportion of the tariffs currently to generate income, we purposely haven't chosen to employ that at this moment in time, simply because we need to make it as attractive as we possibly can for private investment. And the subsequent charging demand is not currently at a level that would enable us to do that. So just to give you an idea of this in practical terms, during a recent procurement exercise, only 2 private sector EV charging suppliers actually submitted interest, one of which actually went into liquidation following the tender process. So it left us with 1. So it just gives you it sort of demonstrate what I'm saying there in terms of the interest. That said, I think it's important to provide that as the context and the background when considering the practicalities of the option of leasing car parking spaces, which is, of course, is the purpose of this report. So just to cover that briefly, so councils in principle can, of course, lease those areas of car parks to external companies, either through concession agreements where they take a share of the revenue, or by allowing companies to install and manage their own infrastructure independently. And technically speaking, yes, leasing council-owned car parking spaces is a feasible option. Of course it is. However, a number of factors require consideration. First, and these are listed within section 1.04 to 1.808 of the report, they include technical infrastructure considerations, whether the site's technically feasible. They may require electrical upgrades, reconfigurations, considerations around regulatory and legal framework, whether the site's legally viable. Local authority car parks are publicly owned, we have to remember that, and lease agreements must comply with procurement rules and be in the public best interest. There are a number of economic and business models also to consider. There's concession agreements, and again, that's probably the closest, I would say, to what the council currently has, and that shifts the burden of capital investment and ongoing maintenance away from the council, which is what we're currently doing. There's also the option of direct leasing, and there's also the option of hybrid models as well. We also need to be considering, with such an option, risk management and long-term planning, and that's detailed in the report. It lists matters such as the technology becoming obsolete, changing regulatory policies, and fluctuating electricity costs, of course, as well. Now, with that all said, as detailed in the report, several local authorities have actually gone that way and utilised those models, including leasing their council-owned car parks. And those local authorities include Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, and also Bristol. Those have been detailed in the report for reference. But in terms of to try and sort of summarise, whether that would be a good option for us as a local authority, and taking into the situation in Flintshire that I outlined earlier, I think, to summarise it, yes, technically speaking, the theory of this is, of course, feasible. The question is it feasible in Flintshire at the moment? And I think the answer quite clearly is no, not just yet. I don't think we're at the stage, I think that's been demonstrated in Flintshire, that electric vehicle ownership is at a substantial level, and therefore, subsequent charging demand is not yet at a level that would make private sector investment in that type of model particularly attractive. As mentioned and hinted at before, at the start of the presentation, even with our current model of allowing private sector investment without the council taking a percentage, the interest has been really minimal. So if we make that even more difficult by requiring them to take on more legal responsibilities and leasing whole areas of car parks and everything that goes with that, then if we haven't had the uptake so far, then I don't think that they're going to find that particularly attractive. So I think, as a recommendation of the report, I think it's recommended that we continue with the current approved strategy that's already been approved until such time as public demand increases, and then we revisit it, and then we can look at making alternative models more attractive for the private sector. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Councillor Coggins-Coburn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anthony, for the report and the introduction. I've got an electric car leased because the technology is moving on so quickly. Now, I don't think it's sensible to own an electric car, but I think it's quite good to lease them. I would say that the model, firstly, I don't think this is something that can be done on a county basis. I think this is something that has probably Councillor Creasy does as well. And in Scotland, you have one card for Charge Scotland, and that deals with the entire charging network in Scotland. Even the private hires have to accept Charge Scotland cards. So it's a terrific system. Again, that's on a national basis. We couldn't do that in Flintshire on our own. So I would suggest that the committee or the council needs to write to Welsh Government to ask them for more leadership, or if they want to have an uptake on EV ownership, because you can't do it on a county basis. Secondly, in my experience of driving to Scotland and driving to London, I stop at Banbury. Now, there's not an awful lot going on in Banbury, with no offence to Banbury, but there's not an awful lot going on in Banbury. However, what they had, the council had sort of like a bit of a wasteland, essentially, sort of a bit of green land. And what they did, they put a car park in, which they gave over to whichever operator wanted to take it with no, you know, like a peppercorn rent, but no financial interest of the council. So as attractive as possible. And then, I mean, my vehicle, it can charge at 150 kilowatts. It's one of the high-speed charging vehicles. Now, to go from sort of 20% to 80 or 100%, because you never charge your car to 80%, it's always to 100. It's never charged to 100%. It's always 80, unless you're immediately driving off. So when I go to Banbury, I do charge it to 100%. The reason I'm saying that is because the maximum length of time in there would be about 40 minutes. So what the council did, they gave the car park over to whichever private operator wanted it. I can't remember if it was BP Pulse now, but anyway. And then they leased the buildings around it that they built to, I think there's like a steakhouse, there's a Costa Coffee, places where you can spend 45 minutes. And that's where the council made its return on the investment, by leasing out those organisations, leasing out those buildings. So you created a market and a destination. And then, of course, when I'm driving, if I've got the choice of going to a car park somewhere in the back end of nowhere with no facilities, or going to Banbury, where it's super fast charging and I can go and get a coffee and a sandwich, that's where I go. So I would, and apologies if I'm teaching the officers to suck eggs. Obviously, you've been doing this professionally, and I'm just, I'm just a driver. I would suggest looking at the Banbury model, because I think it's highly successful. They started with 16 superchargers. They've now gone to 30. And the top end ones now charge at 300 kilowatts, which is very fast for vehicles, faster than my car can take now, as an example of the technology moving on. So that would be my advice, and I hope that's based on my experience. I hope that's not patronising to the officers. What I would also suggest is that I think the model of charging in car parks is only for people who are going on distances. So you go there and you want 150, 300 watts to charge your car. The model for the local car parks, I don't think works, because they are generally local shoppers who are nipping into town to get their bits and bobs and going home. I think where the council could make a bigger impact would be working out how people who, I'm very lucky, I've got a drive, so I charge my car at home on the drive. It's no one's way. We need to work out how people that don't have drives and have on-street parking, how they can charge their vehicles. Anecdotally from my ward, residents who have sort of said to the council, I want to run the lead across the pavement. Obviously, the council has said, on your bike, you're not running an electrical cable over the pavement where people can trip over. That's the solution that we need to come up. And I think allowing the private sector to redevelop the environment, the private sector move in. And I think, again, with homeowners, we provide a solution where they can put in a pod point. When we had ours installed, it was about £1,000. And if you can afford an electric car, generally speaking, you can afford £1,000 for a pod point. And then that, you charge it at home. You never have to charge it outside. I mean, that was the glorious thing about driving an electric car, was that you very rarely had to charge it day to day. It was just always full from being parked outside. So that's, as I say, that's my perspective. I can't say I've got much evidence apart from my experience of talking to other electric. We're a fascinating group of people, other electric drivers. But yes, there we go. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. No, some really, really good points there, and completely agree. It's something that I think a lot of our local authorities are feeding back. You can't just look at this in a secular way within your own county boundary. You've got to be looking at it, across Wales as a whole and cross-border as well into England, because, we've had many a horror story where people say, well, I've you know, I can't go to a certain part in Wales because there's literally no charge points. You've got to think strategically. You've got to have your local charge points. You've got to have, you know, and rapid charge points at certain points, you know, especially when you're looking at long journeys and tourist areas and tourist journeys. So that is something that is being looked at across Wales as a whole, that I can inform you. I think it's a really good point about the consistency of charging plans. That has always been the case, and Scotland has always been referred to as a really good, you know, a really good example of that. No matter where you go, you can use the same card. Again, we hear the horror stories about people saying, "Well, I'm not in that club, so I can't charge there." And even if they do find a charging point, doesn't mean that they can use it. So I think it also goes a bit further than that in terms of the standardisation of infrastructure. That's something that we've certainly tried to do within Flintshire, is all our infrastructure is standardised, and that's through liaison with other local authorities as well, neighbouring authorities. Obviously, we have more influence with Welsh authorities than we do across the border in England. That's always going to be the case. But that is more for, I think, as you say, a steer from Welsh Government and Transport for Wales to try and make that integrate as best as possible. That Banbury model that you referenced, certainly, I don't think anyone would take offence at that. I think it's a really good idea. And I guess that forms part of a much sort of wider strategy, and, you know, where we do look, you know, or where we highlight those, you know, those sites that, you know, that would receive the best public interest. They've got to be on the right location to destinations, but as you say, also have those facilities around them in terms of a service station environment. So no one can argue with that. I think that's a really good idea. In terms of car parks, yes, definitely right there in terms of the local shoppers. They are there for local shoppers. What they also allow is for overnight charging as well. You know, because the car parks are open, people can use them to charge overnight. On-street parking is always an issue. If you've got your own driveway, you've got your own hookup point, that's great. If you live in a different part or, you know, a different environment where you've got terrace houses, can't necessarily just plug it in through your front room window, can you, and leave a cable trailing. And that has been a real big concern for a lot of local authorities. But there's a lot of work going on currently with regards to that. There have been a few test cases. They're utilising existing street lighting columns with ducts that come out of the pavement, so that you can actually plug in and charge. But it's more of a trickle charge that overnight. You know, so that technology is there and is being developed. Agree that that's not necessarily going to be the most lucrative for third party, and I think that's probably where we're going to have to maybe take more of the steer on that, but that is something that we are currently looking at. Thank you.
Okay, quickly.
Right, thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. Just to quickly say, I think whilst the EV ownership in Wales isn't that high, I don't think that's necessarily a barrier, because I think one of the tricks that, not that I say that we're missing, but we haven't taken advantage of yet, is the amount of traffic that goes through Flintshire to other parts of Wales. And I think there's a real scope for us being the gateway to Wales. And I think if we can have a site off the A55 on the way in for facilities for people going into Eryri and other places, you know, Carnarvon and Bangor, those types of places, I think there's a real opportunity there. Because I mean, the Rheg estate, which I think is in Denbighshire, they have a fantastic charging facilities there. And of course, then, I mean, whenever I go there, I spend a minimum of 50 quid, because then you walk around the gift shop. So not gift shop, but, you know, organic food and stuff like that. I always eat very well after charging the car, the Rheg estate. So yeah, I think gateway to Wales, unified marketing strategy along with that, and the right facilities, I think we can really help. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. I did have some notes, but after listening to Councillor Coggins-Cogan, I think we should really applaud his knowledge and experience, and it makes me think perhaps that as a council we shouldn't go our own way. I think we have to accept what we've got now, and I think that's really what's coming out of the report. Let's keep what we've got. But I was looking at some points where it talks about the council will provide the electricity to each of the charging points. Now, how much does that cost upon average, and how much has it costed us to do that. Because would the cost of providing the electric to the parking space outweigh the cost benefit of actually leasing out the space? And under a concession agreement, does the council receive a lease payment plus a share of the tariff? Looking at all the cases in 106, under the current system, would the council have to provide the electric in all those cases where we have the hybrid model, the concession, and also direct leasing? Direct leasing does seem to be an option that I would look at. It's leased on a fixed term basis, so I think you'd get a fixed term income. And it says that they bear the costs of installation operational. But does that exclude electricity? Because I think if you just said, there's the space, you put the electric in, you run it, that would be something to look at. But I think from what Councillor Cogan says, I think we should be looking at an all Wales model. We need some sort of consistency. I recently parked in Chester and then Wrexham, and of course the side of the road you have an app. Yeah, so I had an app on my phone. I think it was Just Park. But when I got there, it doesn't accept that. It wants pay by phone. So then you have to stand there and say, well, I can't park, or I need to download the app. And if the signal's good, and it takes 20 minutes, put the app in, put your password, create an account. Oh, it didn't work, try it again. And you think, looking over your shoulder, is a guy coming round to fine me for not paying a fee? And again, Wrexham, there's yet another one. I haven't got that on my phone. I gave up in the end. I thought, I'm not putting all them on my phone. So I think there is, it's a valid argument that we look at an all Wales situation, so all the councils can collaborate together. And I think that, yeah, we sort of maybe just pause what we've got at the moment. We are where we are, and then look at the example that Councillor Cogan gave about Banbury. That's a bigger project, leasing a space as opposed to creating an infrastructure where you can charge for 40 minutes and have a cup of tea and a sandwich. That takes that's a lot longer. But that, again, you could have various leaseholders running those. So I think we need a lot of thought going in to create an infrastructure which is going to deliver. So at the moment, we're looking at individual spaces. I have to say, I did notice too, in the council car park in Buckley, but I've never seen a car there. Maybe, I'm there at the wrong time. I don't know. So do you have any statistics on the existing spaces that are leased out as to their usage? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Sorry, I'll come back to those questions. I might ask you, might just need some clarification on one of them. But just taking the last one first, do we have statistics on usage? Yes, we do. We can get them. I don't have them here, but I can certainly speak with the energy team on that. We can certainly get those. I just want to check I've got some of your questions right here, Councillor Pearce. So in terms of providing electricity to the site, the question is, how much would that cost? And I think, that's very hard to say, because I think it depends on the site individually. We would have to have a connection cost undertaken by Scottish Power Energy Networks. What that cost would be, it's hard to say. For every site we have to write off, and we have to get a quotation to start with to find out how much that is going to be. But that then, sometimes it's so prohibitive that then makes the site, it's just nil and void really, because you think, well, from a business case model, if you're going to invest in that, especially if it's going to be private ownership and they've got to recuperate their costs, there's that much cost going in to try and upgrade the electricity network, then it almost makes it non-viable. But that's not to say that you wouldn't do it, because strategically it may be really important. So you know, that was something that you could achieve grant funding for. But then again, even with some of the grant funding, it can be quite difficult because typically they used to allocate you X amount per site. I think it used to be about £6,000 or £7,000. And some sites, you've got no chance of doing that. Your connection cost could be 2 or 3 times more that just to start with. But, you know, that has changed. So it does give us a bit more feasibility. In terms of the concession agreement, I think you asked council, does a council receive a lease and a tariff? Is that currently, or do you mean in terms of a potential to be option? Currently, no. So we do not receive a lease for that. And we don't take a percentage of the tariffs. That is, we could say to our current provider to say, right, from now on, we're going to take 8%. But the reason, as we mentioned in the report, that we haven't chosen to do that is because it's not, it's not very attractive as it currently stands. And I think if we went out to tender to say we want to take, X percentage, I'm not so sure we'd actually get anybody coming forward to actually take that risk of installing and maintaining the infrastructure. That's not to say that we wouldn't do it. We would always have looked at that as an income generation option. But I think the usage levels have to increase for that to be feasible. Because if they don't, there's very, I think as in terms of the market interest shows, there's very little in it as it currently stands for those external companies. So we're trying to encourage as best we can, rather than to put another hurdle in their way. I think then the third question, I think, if I'm right in saying, Councillor Pearce, was a bit similar to the other questions that I've answered in terms of the connection costs. Who would pay the connection cost for any given site? Well, I think typically, again, we would acquire funding for those sites to try and actually provide that connection so that we have the connection in the ground ready for a third party to come in and to hook up those charge points. We would provide a feeder pillar from that grant funding, and they would just come in and set up and then manage and operate those charge points. And in terms of the costs of electricity, I think you mentioned as well the physical cost of electricity, that would be charged back to the supplier. That wouldn't be something that we would pay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anthony. So what we're actually doing then is we're providing a convenience to people, because we're paying to install the electric, but we get nothing back at this stage. So we're providing a free service, if you like, which, okay, for those with electric cars, it's useful, and a lot of those will be our residents. But interestingly, on the I can see that it's reasonable that you assess the cost of installation, and there'll be a cut-off point at some point, won't there? So, and just whether you will take forward Councillor Cogan model and have a look at it, and then explore the All Wales approach. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly that. And I think certainly what you said, Councillor Pearce and Councillor Coggins mentioned, that's something that we are looking at currently on a sort of more, extensive strategy. But yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wakeham.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, give some information and ask a question. Mike asked the question I wanted to ask about costs, but we looked at it in our village to put in a point, and the costs of just moving the power to the area was £16,000 just to get the cable from the road to where the site was. We had similar quotes just to put in a CCTV camera moving it 20 metres. This is how much National Grid are charging. A friend of mine tried to put in some power to a site in Kinnerton. It was 68 metres he needed it, and it was nearly £100,000 to put a cable in to run what he needed. So these charges are massive. On 1.06, just to ask Councillor Shalcroft and Lloyd, are there not 3 charging points in Saltney? Yeah, sorry, yeah. So yeah, because it says there's only 8, but there are 3 in Saltney. Opposite the Ability World, yeah. There are 3 public charging points there as well, at the traffic lights. That was just
Councillor Ted Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As this is under my portfolio, I'm interested in the comments made by Councillor Coggins-Cogan. I do have a little query about it. In Scotland, you said there's a one card for everything, right? And if we had a one card for everything in Wales, which is I assume that's what you're sort of indicating. What then happens if somebody from Scotland visits Wales or somebody from Wales visits Scotland? Do they have to get another card, or how does that system work? And the other thing I can confirm is we will explore every avenue to try and come up with something that's suitable.
Councillor Coggins-Cogan, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. I feel like a member of the Cabinet now, being asked questions in committees, exciting. The honest answer is I don't know. I imagine it would be an arrangement between the organisations running in Scotland, organisation in Wales. I think my point is essentially the convenience. It's like in Flint, there's a hotel, which I can't remember the name, but at the back of the hotel, you've got Tesla superchargers there. And up until I think 18 months ago, it was only one of the very few Tesla sites in the UK where anyone could use their charging system, because Tesla sites were normally reserved just for Teslas, but that site was open to all. So I used to go there. Now in Scotland, all of the Tesla sites are open because by virtue of getting their permissions and being hooked up, they have to accept Charge Scotland. So, I mean, it may eventually develop that it's Charge UK. You'd have one card for the entire UK, which is, I think, the way we need to go. But I think as Officer Anthony Stanfield has said, Scotland is seen as in the UK anyway as a model to achieve. And I don't know the mechanics behind it, but as a user, it's incredibly useful knowing I've got this one card. I can go to any charger and they have to accept me. And Glasgow, which is mentioned, they've got fantastic chargers just outside Glasgow, completely private, but they accept Charge Scotland. And then just to briefly add, the other useful thing is you don't pay for it at the time. It's a direct debit at the end of the month. So it's really quick. It's essentially just recording. It's not seeking authorization. So it doesn't matter if it doesn't have great connection. It just logs it. At the end of the month, you get a bill on your direct debit. It's really good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. It wasn't a critical question. It was just as a non-electric car owner, and I don't know these things. I'm quite happy to have a chat with you at some point and look at other avenues forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next on this, Councillor Crease.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. Just an observation that if this was a commercially attractive business model, currently, Shell, BP, and all the other energy providers would be swarming all over it, creating sites like the Banbury site you quoted. If we're going to be involved in encouraging the provision of charging infrastructure, it's going to come at a cost, and a significant cost. And going forward, I think that is a critical decision for us as a council. It's whether on our own we could consider the sums of money involved. Councillor Wakelam's I'm in the process of having an extension built in my house, and I have to move the electric supply, and I would like to move the electricity supply. Moving the supply from the pavement to the new point, I've been quoted £26,000. The provision of power over and above that, because I asked the question to have it uprated, the power supply to my house to have it rated, so that I could consider buying an electric car and have a car that charged reasonably well. It went up from that figure to the thick end of £50,000 to have the supply uprated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lloyd, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I haven't got an electric car, so I have no idea how long it takes to charge one, no idea how much the costs are to charge one up. But I think Councillor Coggins-Cogan at the Banbury, I mean, it must cost him a fortune. Every time he charges a car, he goes shopping, a farm shop. And, if you need a sub anytime, let me know. But we do have two, I think is it 2 or 3? Jay?
Maybe 2, I think.
Yeah, charging points, farm foods in Sotley, and I'll be honest with you, I've never seen anybody there. I think they're more important to have, as Councillor Cogan says again, he's very knowledgeable, isn't he? Down the A55, somewhere like that. But to have one in a car park in, where should I mention without getting into trouble? Alkin, no. You know, most people have got them at the houses, haven't they? They charge them up from the houses, and I don't know whether it's cheaper to charge at your house at a point. I would imagine it would be like. So I think at this moment in time, it's not feasible to introduce any more to the council car parks. Because I think Councillor Bithell said, is there one in Mull or Buckley? You said, didn't you? Buckley. And they're not used very much.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So no, I wouldn't agree to go any further than we already have at the moment. So, thank you.
This is becoming a nice conversation. Councillor Bithell.
Yes, it's been a very useful discussion really on this, and again, it's been quite educational insofar as many of us are not owners of electric cars. I've got a hybrid, that's as near as I've got, but there we go. Again, the report emphasises, areas such as Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester. These are large cities with large numbers of commuters going in and out of town. So it's a different scenario altogether from Flintshire. And again, I hear the comments by Councillor Cogan relating to Banbury. I go down the M40 very often when I go down to my daughter's. But again, you've got a collective audience there, or user group really, people using the motorway there who can pop into Banbury and use it and probably do need it by the time they got to that particular point. But again, we got nothing comparable with that except, of course, the A55 expressway. And I was just wondering, I do entirely agree with the all Wales approach, if that could be pursued. But again, as an interim, because is this something we can actually raise through the CJC subgroup, the Highways and Transportation subgroup, as an issue, which perhaps all the North Wales councillors can sign up to really in pursuing this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bithell. Okay, I'll end with Anthony and then we'll go to the recommendations.
So just to address Councillor Bithell on his question, whilst I remember, because I haven't written that down, but yes and yes. So it is something we can raise, and it is something that we have raised. So as part of the regional transport plan consultation, we did raise the importance of EV charging and having that standardised approach across Wales, but then obviously into neighbouring counties, countries, and just going back to the point, the discussion before about, well, the interaction between England, Scotland, Wales and Scotland, but in theory, where does it stop? It should be across Europe, shouldn't it? So if we're getting tourists coming in from France, Germany, Italy, wherever, and they're driving, then that should be consistent across, or at least have the ability to do so. So yes, we certainly raised that. Just to close it then, in terms of Councillor Creasy's comments about the risk, you mentioned about the costs at your extension. 26,000 or something just to move the electric, but this is what we're up against, and it is a big risk. But I think that just reinforces the approach that we're taking as a council now, both in terms of making the environment right by getting the electrical installations through grant funding, and then everything above and beyond that in terms of installation, maintenance and removal at the end if required is undertaken by the private sector. So it is reducing the risk. We're eliminating that risk to the council. Okay, thank you.
To make progress, Chair, can I move the recommendations with the addition that we pursue these issues via the Welsh Government and also the CJC Highways and Transportation Committee? Thank you.
Okay, so that's the recommendations. Now moving to them on page 83. There's 2 recommendations there with the addition that we pursue the Welsh Government and through the CJC. Yep. And seconded. I will show of hands. All those in favour? Carried by everybody. Okay, thank you very much. As we head to lunchtime, we'll now move on to agenda item 8, the food service delivery plan. So I'll hand over to the officers.
Thank you very much, Chair and Bodadar members. The report before you today and also the food safety plan, food service plan rather, is requesting your support before it heads off to Cabinet for final approval. We are required to produce an annual plan by the Food Standards Agency. And the purpose of the plan is to report on the performance of those teams that undertake work in relation to food safety, food standards, and also animal feed, and also to outline the forward work programme for the current financial year. So programmed inspections for food safety and food standards are scheduled in accordance with Food Law Code of Practice risk profile. I'm sure many of you will already know this, but food safety has 5 risk bands of A through to E. Food standards has 3 risk bands of A through to C, with A being the highest. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the service and our environmental health service was no different to other environmental health services throughout the UK, but we were significantly impacted in the ability to undertake programmed inspections. This resulted in a significant volume of overdue inspections, and the FSA at the time provided guidance to all local authorities with timelines for returning to delivering their programmed inspections in line with the Food Code of Practice. And I'm pleased to say we've addressed the backlog now. We addressed that in 24-25. And I think for us to be able to reach that position, I'd like to recognise the important work that Helen O'Loughlin, who sat beside me, that Helen and her team have undertaken, because it's actually been as a result of careful planning and also working in conjunction with partners, and also working in conjunction with the FSA. And just to give you a flavour of the achievements that the team realised in 24-25, before I move on to the targets for the current financial year. So in 24-25, the team achieved 100% of completed 100% of category A through to C hygiene inspections. And of course, these are the businesses with the highest risk profile. 98% of overdue or due category D inspections were completed, and 92% of category E overdue or due interventions were completed as well. During that financial year, the team also dealt with 13 food incidents. Now, food incidents can vary in terms of the nature of the resource and implications for the team. But to give you sort of a flavour of some of the areas that they had to be part of, they dealt with a cross-contamination matter as a result of nut allergens in food with a national distribution firm. And also there was a food alert for action in relation to listeria in chilled foods as well. So these are quite far-reaching and challenging areas potentially affecting a lot of people. If I turn then, and it's in point 1.04 of the report in terms of the targets for 25-26, it's also included in the plan itself, of course. So some of the areas, some of the targets that the team are looking to achieve in the current financial year is to complete all due category A through to D food hygiene inspections, to complete all overdue new business inspections, to complete all due category E food hygiene interventions by inspection to provide a current food hygiene rating, and to complete all category A through to B standards inspections. That's just a flavour for you. Hopefully that provides members with reassurance in terms of the team's performance. with regard to the previous financial year, and also that I'm pleased to say we're on track for the current financial year as well. And we will be returning a return to the FSA, I believe, at the end of the 6-month period as well. We're more than happy to take any questions. Should you have any, Helen will be able to provide you with sort of any technical explanations if required. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Okay, thank you very much. Very positive report. Thank you for that. And I spotted Councillor Chris Biffle first, and then Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Because for the last 8 years, I've been over there with Sian and delivering this report to this particular overview scrutiny committee. I think, Sian has already mentioned, but I'd like to be associated with the very diligent work that goes on by Helen McLaughlin and her team in the daily tasks that they carry out on our behalf. It often annoys me immensely when I see comments on Facebook and so on. What do we get from the council? They only empty our bins. And sometimes they don't even acknowledge that. But, this is, again, an important job that goes on. Very often under the radar, people don't consider this from one day to the next, unless something goes wrong. And then it becomes extremely serious and people sit up and take note. The fact that things don't go hugely wrong on a regular occasion is because of the hard work that is done by our team here and teams like it throughout the country. I was a member, I think you've heard me say this before, many years ago, I was a member of a district council, which was the health authority in that particular time. And again, there was an outbreak of food poisoning in the borough, and it had huge consequences, not just in the borough, but nationwide as well. And that made me very much aware, really, of the important work that is done daily by people like Helen and her team, because, we all eat and we all drink. And if something goes wrong, we can become seriously ill and people die as a consequence. It's that serious. So we need to be giving this particular service a high tick mark, really, for the work that they do regularly for and on our behalf. If I could just ask one question, and that is in relation to the food hygiene ratings given to shops and food premises. These are very useful to us all, and again, I think it determines, where we go to eat, and that's quite right and proper. And it's had the effect, I think, of raising standards in terms of food production and food service throughout Wales as a consequence. I'm just wondering too, because there was a report recently, I think on Wales News, to say that there are circumstances where shops and restaurants and cafes and so on are not displaying the certificates. I'm just wondering to what extent we actually check up on this and make sure that they are, because again, it does help to determine, where we shop and where we eat. And again, I think that has a beneficial effect in terms of other premises who've got low ratings up in their game, and to ensure that they are improving their standards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bithell. With regards to when we check the food hygiene rating stickers, it is mandatory that they display those in Wales. And so we actually have a really high compliance level with that as part of any visit that we undertake at a business, whether it be as a proactive programmed inspection or a result of a complaint. We also check that those food hygiene rating stickers are on display and are done so in a conspicuous manner as well. And we have really good compliance record with that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Sian and Helen for the report. It was really interesting. As an enthusiastic consumer of food, I'm definitely on one side of the fence. I don't know much about the other sort of regulatory side of it. So it was a really interesting report. So most of my questions are just for my information, because there are bits that to me don't make sense, but obviously they do. It's just to my reading of it, I don't understand them. So, but I'd like to associate myself with what Councillor Bithell has said, because it is an essential part of our society. There are certain populist political parties out there that advocate slashing of red tape and get rid of regulations and things like that. this is a really important regulation, a really important bit of red tape is keeping people safe. On a personal level, we had a recent interaction with your department because we had Campylobacter in the house, and it's a reportable incident, so it was reported to Public Health Wales, and the council got in contact very quickly with your questionnaire. So it was, you know, on a personal level, I commend the service you gave because it was very, very speedy. So on to the questions from probably the most ignorant member of the committee. So on page 106, paragraph 104, the alternative enforcement strategy questionnaire, how is that sort of discharged? When is that completed? Is that when you sent out the questionnaire and you sort of tick that that's done, or is it when you get the questionnaire back and the person's engaged with it and then it's done? The reason I ask is obviously that contributes to your 94% and 96%. So I just want to know how you get up there, you know, what's necessary to achieve those really impressive statistics. On page 117, you discuss the statutory classification sampling of the shellfish on the D, and that accounts for a large proportion of your sampling budget. Does that mean there's no fee income from that? You can't charge a fee for that sampling? And next, on page 119, table 3, I don't know what a supplier of surplus food is. So just give me an example of what that is. Again, apologies to the committee if this is all obvious to everyone else and I'm the only one that doesn't know. On page 125, third paragraph down, so the food safety and food standards complaints between 110 and 130 does not include complaints referred by other LAs, whether it's the home or originating authority. So what would be the full number, and why are those referred complaints not counted initially? You know, what's the rationale to exclude them in that first instance? And then on page 127, again, this is a bit where I think this is me that's making a mistake and not the report. You have 20 samples for the food standards, you know, taken as, you know, planned or from complaints. I'm just contrasting that with these earlier on in the report, it says there's between 110 and 130 complaints. So why only 20 samples for that number of complaints? I mean, suppose thinking about it for more than a second, it may be that you've had 6 complaints to the same establishment for the same meal, so maybe that explains it. And I think that's everything. So thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for dealing with my silly questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coggins-Cogan. Helen will respond to the technical questions that you've posed. There is no such thing as a silly question. We welcome any questions because it helps, you know, build up the knowledge. So I would also flag up that the nature of the plan itself, the headings are predetermined by the FSA. We follow a format, a pro forma essentially. So it is by the very nature of quite a technical document for that reason. So, but I am going to hand over to Helen, who I know has been busily, well, we've both been busily scribbling away. So please remind us if we haven't noted anything down, we will come back to it. Thank you.
Okay, right. So I'll take your questions in turn. Hopefully I've got them all written down. So with regards to the alternative enforcement questionnaires, we don't count them until we've had the return back, because what we then need to do is review the information in it and decide, are we going to prioritise it for inspection or leave it within that alternative enforcement arena. With regards to shellfish, there isn't any fee income for it. It's a statutory service for it. With regard to supplier of surplus food, it's businesses like supermarkets that when they've got any over, like baked bread, that type of thing, then it goes over into being animal feed and their feed registered for that purpose. With regards to complaint counting, we don't count the ones that have come across to us as a referral from another local authority, because otherwise as a nation we'd be double counting the complaints. And so the Food Standards Agency requests that for our return purposes, it is only those that are made directly to us that we count. And then with regards to complaints and number of food samples are taken as part of a programme that we set at the beginning of the year of actual samples to be taken. And complaints in and of themselves don't always result in the need to go and take a food sample, because it could be, for example, related to a business that hasn't got any hot water when someone visits, or it's a hygiene issue that they've got concerns over. If we feel as a result of a complaint that we need to actually go and sample at that business, then we pull them into our sampling rota.
Just one more question by the indulgence of the chair. I note on the animal feeds that they're sort of broken down into high risk and low risk. And I was sort of surprised that high risk, and I understand this is statutory, so I'm just asking for your opinion possibly rather than any further comment, but it's, if the animal feed in business is sort of deemed as high risk, I was surprised then that the statutory sampling is every 3 years, because it would seem to me that 3 years is a long time to go without it being tested or sampled if it's deemed as high risk. And I just wondered whether, with your professional experience, whether you think 3 years is too long, that should be narrowed down, or, and, irrespective of whether the effects on resources and things like that, just on your opinion, whether you think that is too long. Because to me, if something's high risk, that would indicate more than every 3 years. Thank you, Chair.
Our compliance in our high risk food business is very good. Therefore, the argument to kind of increase those interventions doesn't seem to have the evidence base to do that currently, because the compliance levels are very good.
Thank you. Shall we? Okay, Councillor Pearce.
Right, thank you, Chair. Thank you. It's a comprehensive report and well presented. Thank you for that. I just want to touch on the display rating certificate. Is there a specific way to display it? Does it need to be immediately visible? I'll give you an example. I went into a takeaway once to order some food, and I was having a look around. I always look around wherever I go for the certificate, and I'm in a queue waiting around, and I found it above the door where you come in. It was high up, and it then dawned on me why it's there, because it had a rating of 1. So obviously we didn't purchase, and we left. So when someone has a rating of 1, does that mean it's really bad and you shouldn't use it? And what's the point of displaying something with a 1 on? I've seen 4s and 5s. I'd never seen a 1 before, but then realised why it was perhaps behind you or above, so you couldn't immediately see it. So is there a specific instruction or a mandatory position where it has to be visible, just when you're standing there, not having to look around and see where it is? And secondly, again, sorry about this, I was in another takeaway the weekend, and it was a takeaway that had an eat-in option. I'm not going to name it, and I'm not going to say where it was. It's got an open kitchen. It looked immaculate. The serving counter was clean. It was tidy, and the food was fine. But waiting around for the order to come across the counter, the place itself, the eating area, was, well, best described as a bit grotty. The bins, the waste bins were overflowing. You know, the sort of bins where you put your cups and your papers and all the other bits. They were overflowing. In fact, it was falling onto the floor. There was food on the floor, and there was food on the tables. So how would that normally be reported. I raised it with the people and said they were under pressure, but they will clean it as soon as possible. So, but from a regulatory point of view, do you do spot checks? Do you sort of turn up unannounced on any particular time, not 9 to 5, say, but at weekends when they're busy, to see what the current state is? Is there regular inspections? Do you have a rota where you inspect every so often? I think if you had a rota and they know you can come every 3 weeks, they'll be expecting you, won't they? So I'm just wondering how it actually works. But yeah, a very, very good report. But I think from what I've just described there is just what I think people do see, on occasions. And I'm not saying that, well, not everyone is like this. Because other takeaways I've been to are okay. This is just the exception, but it's timely. The fact we're looking at page 114, enforcement of food safety and food hygiene. So although it hasn't come across the counter, there is food being left around on the floor and the tables, and I'm just wondering where that fits in the overall scheme. But yeah, very good report. Thank you.
Okay, to take a few of those points in turn then. So with regards to the food hygiene rating display, the legislation says it needs to be in a conspicuous place. And that's as any of us would view to be conspicuous. So if it was on display and there was something obstructing what the actual rating was, then we could issue a fixed penalty notice for that because it isn't conspicuous. Obviously, for different types of business, what constitutes conspicuous can be different, dependent on, for example, how many businesses share that front door. If you saw a sea of 5s and a 1, is it very clear as to which one that relates to? So it's really as for each business, as part of our inspection, we have a discussion with them about where would be an appropriate place for them to display it. What I would say is if anyone's got concerns as to that it isn't in a conspicuous manner, then that can be reported to us because there are offences under the display regulations. Okay. With regards to unannounced visits, the majority of our visits are unannounced. In fact, it's by exception that they would be announced, and it would usually be to our major manufacturers where we're actually needing the technical team to be available and engineering manager to be available to us. And even in those circumstances, we usually don't make an appointment. We tell them we'll see you in the next 3 months. Are there any dates that you aren't available because you're getting an external audit, for example? With regards to the times of day that we do it, many businesses within our area are only open, evening onwards, really. So particularly in the takeaway sector. So officers do go out at all times of day and night, and we're working on a regular basis till 7 o'clock, possibly, if that's the takeaway that they're going to doesn't open till 5 o'clock. We also have businesses that open on a Saturday and Sunday only. That said, of course, the majority of the inspections are taken during the daytime when the businesses are running. We try to see them at different times of day, so it's not that we always go when they're really quiet, so we can actually see the kitchen operating in a true sense as to what it looks like when it's under pressure. We do get complaints about hygiene at the front of those types of establishments, and those are exactly the kind of complaints I was referring to earlier, that we go to unannounced to do a complaint investigation to see is it a justified complaint or not. With regards to when we go, that's where the wristband comes in. The purpose of those wristbands is to determine when the next food inspection is due. So those that are an A for food hygiene, it's every 6 months. Those that are category D, it is every 2 years. And that's what this report sets out, is our programmed inspections are those unannounced inspections based on risk.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Ted Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's nice to receive a positive, good news report for a change. I can confirm enforcement. I mean, there's quite a few takeaways in Hollywood, and I was contacted by one proprietor asking the question about does he have to display it, because he'd obviously got a 1, and I did tell him yes, and he didn't, and the enforcement made him. So it does happen.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, I've got no indication. Oh, Councillor Lloyd?
I don't know how many you've got in your team, Helen, but I mean, it's a bit of a task, this, isn't it? The amount of restaurants and well, takeaways, there's a lot in Flintshire. But it's good to see on page 144, the percentages are very good. You know, the 586.2 down to the 1.5. That must be the one that Councillor Pearce went to and didn't like the look of it. But I think the results are, you know, would speak for themselves. Really, you're absolutely doing a really good job. You know, when you get some that you have to award a 1 to hygiene rating, is it quite often happens that they do improve over a time, or do they end up closing down and giving up, or do you get a lot that improve? Thank you.
Okay, with regards to the ones, 0s, 1s and 2s, there's kind of two interventions. One is that we go and revisit anyway. We do what we call an enforcement revisit, and that's a policy that's followed across Wales, across all local authorities. The idea being is, whilst they might have a rating of 1 from their food hygiene inspection, we want to make sure that they're actually compliant as a result of that, and so we will go out and do enforcement revisits. We can't give a new rating on the basis of that. The Act for Food Hygiene Rating is very explicit in what we need to cover, and it's all, to intents and purposes, a full inspection. So the enforcement revisits that we do at 1 and 2 month intervals are there to ensure that we're bringing them into compliance, which then, once they've done that, they can then apply for a re-rating inspection. That is chargeable. We can recoup costs. We've set that figure at £255 across Wales, and that's reviewed every few years. And that's the business's ability, once it has improved its standards, to actually pay us to go and do another inspection before its next due intervention, and we go out and hopefully they will then increase on their food hygiene rating. And the majority of time they do.
And how many is in your team?
I've got, there's 12.5 of it, 12.5 in total across the whole of food hygiene and standards. And we're a really busy team. It's a lot of work for us.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to, moving to the recommendation, there is, just to change the comment, it says members approve. Well, we don't approve here, so we're looking to change the word to members support the food service plan 25-26 and provide any comment to cabinet. Have a mover? Moved. Seconded. Have a show of hands, all those in favour? That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It is now just gone 12. I propose that we take a break, a comfort break, and we reconvene until we say 25 past. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members and everybody, for coming back. We're going to have to make a few changes to the schedule, the agenda, as one of the officers has got meetings elsewhere. So we're now going to be looking, instead of agenda item 9, we're going to move agenda item 15 forward, followed by agenda item 12, and then we'll move back to the normal order, a sequence of events. Councillor Mears?
Yeah, I was going to add comments on the schools parking task and finish, which was scheduled to be the next item, but I will have to go at 1:30 as explained. So I'm not sure whether I will be able to do that if we defer it.
And it's unfortunate the officer has to meeting in another authority. So I've agreed to move that item forward anyway. So I'm assured it's not a long item. So, but obviously that's dependent on the questions put forward by members.
Can any indulge then, Chair, if I do have to go before we have the task and finish group meeting, can I add comments after this meeting? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
The Education Consultative Committee, and I need to go, it's online, so I need to get on for that, so I'll have to leave half one as well. I miss lunch.
okay, thank you. I'm sorry, it's a bit unfortunate. So, moving to, for the members just joined us, just saying that we're changing the schedule around slightly due to an officer having to be elsewhere. So, going to move to agenda item 15, which is the Fleet Service Organisational Structure Review, but this is due to local government access to information to consider exclusion of press and public. Can I have a mover and seconder that we exclude press and public? Moved, seconded. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Okay, so can we stop the webcast?